Hello, welcome. We are recording live audiobook today. Let's get started. Okay. Chapter 7. Jack had barely stepped onto the street when Clara... let's do that again. Jack had barely stepped onto the street when Clara grabbed the sleeve of his coat. "I'm not going to dinner with you and Delia." "It's not going to dinner. I just want to talk for a minute to see if this is even..." "Yeah, still not coming." Clara dropped his arm, then looked both ways and darted across the street. "Clara!" "I'll be in the pub." She pointed at a sign with a Union Jack and flashed a grin before turning her back on him and heading down the sidewalk in the opposite side of the street. She pointed at a sign with a Union Jack and flashed a grin before turning her back on him and heading down the sidewalk on the opposite side of the street. "Where's she going?" Mary stopped next to him and wrapped a scarf around her neck. Jack blew out a breath, sending a cloud into the air between them. "She didn't want dinner." She didn't want dinner. Mary laughed. Delia, Tony, and his assistant appeared in the parking lot behind the venue. Delia looked around. "Where's Clara?" "She went for a pint." Mary linked arms with Delia and followed Tony's assistant to the corner, leaving Jack to walk with the big man himself. Tony was large, surprisingly so considering Jack spent most of his time with professional athletes. "Did you used to play?" Jack asked. "Hockey?" Oops. "Hockey?" Tony shook his head. "No, I've got zero coordination. My PE teacher in high school begged me to try out, and within 10 minutes of seeing me on the ice, he asked if I was actually Canadian." "Ouch." "I'm not. I was born in Boston." Jack laughed. "Don't usually hear of people from Mass coming this direction. Usually the other way around." "Parents were both from Ontario. My dad was finishing his doctorate at Berkeley." "Isn't that in California?" "No, the Berkeley College of Music." Jack nodded. "So you came by this line of work honestly." "Never thought I'd be on the promotional side of things. I always thought I'd be the pop star." "Still time, bud." Tony grabbed the door from Kel's and held it while Jack walked into the airlock. "You seem like a nice guy, Jack." "Thanks." "I've met plenty of assholes that seem like nice guys." Jack paused with his hand on the next door. "Probably something you should have asked about then, before the contract was drawn up." Tony's jaw flexed. "I have a job to do, and I'm damn good at it. I'm not her father or anything." "But now you're realizing that this could go south if I'm a dick?" "Exactly." Jack pulled the door open. "It's a good thing I'm not, then." He strode into the restaurant to heads already turning their direction. "Isn't that what a dick would say?" "Probably." Jack followed the waiter to a back room. Mary and Kells took a table in the far corner as the waiter motioned Delia to a two-seater next to the window. His step faltered. He hadn't meant he needed to talk to Delia solo, but now didn't see a way out of it. Jack strode forward and shrugged off his coat, then hung it over the back of his chair. Delia did the same but didn't sit. Jack stood next to the table. "I didn't mean to make this even more awkward." She breathed a laugh. "And yet somehow you succeeded." Delia looked up, her eyes wide. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that." She looked genuinely repentant. "I think you did mean to say that." She glanced down at the menu on the table in front of her, and her eyes shifted to the tablet Kells left in Jack's spot. "It was a thought that wasn't supposed to make it into the real world. Normally, I'm crashing on a couch by now, after a show." Jack nodded. He understood that. In his early 20s, all he wanted to do after a game was party. Even before his increased popularity, staying out late had been a harder sell. Even after his increased popularity, staying out late had been a harder sell. "Do you mind if I..." Delia held up her phone. Jack shook his head and glanced out the window next to the table. He and Delia, though protected from the rest of the diners, were in prime viewing position from the sidewalk. A small group had already stopped to take pictures. Delia set her phone down. Sorry, just needed to text my mom. Jack felt like a dick for momentarily judging her phone habits. He rapped his knuckles on the back of the chair. Tony's a genius. Why? Because he found a way for us to make headlines without you even signing the contract? Delia sat, and Jack suddenly wondered what had happened to the outfit she'd worn on stage. All his senses were playing catch-up. He'd been so amped up in that dressing room, all he'd seen was her face, her expressions. He hadn't even noticed what she was wearing. Jack, can you sit down? You're making this awkward, Tony called from the back of the room. Delia pursed her lips. Jack pulled out his seat and did as he was told. I apologize for Tony. He's not exactly sensitive. Delia pulled the menu closer, and Jack noticed her nails were cut short, her fingers long and slender. Jack gripped his chair and scooted in. Has he always been your publicist? Only since I started with Indie Lake last summer. She kept her head bowed, scanning each line of the menu like she was going to be tested on it. Based on her flushed skin and panicked breathing back in the room, she didn't enjoy making eye contact, but Jack was dying for her to look up. You've only been signed with the label since the summer? He asked. Delia nodded and finally lifted her chin, crossing her arms on the table in front of her. Is that off-putting, Mr. I only got signed 3 weeks ago? Jack grinned as shock flitted over her expression a second time. Another inside thought? He asked. She was about to apologize again, but Jack held up a hand. Just a second. He inspected her eyes in the softer lighting of the restaurant. In the dressing room, the garish fluorescent bulbs had created strange shadows, and he hadn't gotten a good look at them. Not for lack of trying. They'd captured his interest the second he'd turned from the door and she'd marched up to him brandishing that tablet. Her irises had a ring of almost fiery red around her pupil that faded into a thin stripe of gold, then bled into pale blue, finally edged by a ring of navy. It was like someone had pressed a pause. It was like someone had pressed pause on a kaleidoscope. On top of that, her left eye had 2 black freckles at 10 o'clock, like drops of midnight ink. They're weird. My eyes. Delia's throat was flushing again. Jack cleared his throat and looked away. Not weird. They're unique. Delia scoffed. That's what my mom used to always tell me, about my eyes, my hair, everything. Even when I came home from school wearing bright pink tights with snakeskin boots and an olive t-shirt, not the color, an actual olive on the front, with my dad's tie to round out the ensemble. Jack chuckled. I'm sure it's... I'm sure it suited you. A smile played at the corner of Delia's mouth. It was disgusting. I have pictures to prove it. Well, your eyes aren't disgusting. Jack had chosen the word unique because he didn't think telling Delia that her eyes were stunning or breathtaking was the right play. Though, was it ever a bad idea to give a woman a compliment? It had been so long he didn't remember the rules. Jack ran a hand through his hair. I don't do this often. What? Gigoloing? Jack laughed out loud. I don't think that's a verb. Delia looked pleased with herself, and his smile slipped. I meant sitting down at a restaurant with someone. The dating thing in general. I meant sitting down at a restaurant with someone. The dating thing in general. In an hour, it had been swarmed by people looking to get his autograph. And I as hell. Oh, wait, you know nothing about me. Delia shrugged, her shoulders pushing up on her soft waves, compressing them like an accordion. I meant it was hard to believe because of the whole famous hockey player thing. She looked back at her menu. Though based on her eye line, he was pretty sure she was staring directly at the kids' meals. I've only been famous for 3 weeks, so I have yet to reap any of the benefits. Jack looked down at the list of entrees, and his attention snagged on the birria tacos. Then he remembered Clara was waiting for him at the pub down the street. He slid the tablet over, flipped open the cover, and started to read. He'd told her he needed a minute to look over the contract, so that's what he'd take. Jack skimmed the sections: number of public appearances, types of appearances, documentation of appearances. You have social media accounts? He asked. I have all the social media accounts. Jack glanced up. Do I have to get them? Delia shook her head. Not as long as you don't mind me posting pics on mine. What kind of pictures? Delia pulled out her phone and spun in her seat, then snapped a selfie shot of them at the table. She turned the screen for him to see. Like that. Not a big deal. I look pissed. Delia deleted the photo. Then try not looking pissed. Perfect. I'll work on that. Jack lowered his voice as their server arrived with an overly broad smile and droplets of sweat forming near his temples. One of the most puzzling things to come out of this newfound celebrity was how hard people had to try to act normal around him. It had to be 10 times worse for Delia. The server put down 2 glasses of water, both with lemon slices floating amidst the ice cubes. Thank you. Delia reached for the glass. I'm ready to order, if that's okay? The server nodded. Of course. What can I get for you? Delia didn't even blink as the poor kid's eyes bugged out of his head. I'd like the birria tacos, please. Jack gave her a look, and Delia slid her hand up her arm. What? That's what I was going to order. Never mind that he'd planned not to order and get the contract review over with. What were the chances that from a menu with 100 different items on it, they'd choose the same thing? Her lips quirked. Then I guess we'll get 2. She handed the server the menu. Delia waited for him to walk away. Did you do that on purpose? Jack frowned. What? You made it seem like we were having a moment. He leaned back in his chair. A moment? Ordering tacos? Delia dropped her phone in her bag. You know that's all the waiter is going to be talking about, right? He's going to tell all his server friends some version of how we both accidentally ordered the same thing, and it's going to show up all over the internet. Jack exhaled. And that's why I don't go out. Delia considered him a moment. This is nice. Better than I thought it would be. Jack squirmed in, somehow giving her the wrong impression because I don't even have to pretend around you since this is just business. But not even real business, you know? Delia smiled up at him. He blinked. You don't have to do... Oops. You don't have anything to do with my music, so I don't have to impress you there. And this isn't going anywhere past April, so I don't have to worry about you wanting to keep me around. April? Delia motioned to the tablet. Keep reading. There's a Keep reading. There's a breakup clause. Jack scrolled. Sure enough, staged breakup. He scanned the next few paragraphs, taking in the details. The breakup would occur after the NHL playoffs. Exact date determined by whenever the Blizzard either got knocked out or won the Stanley Cup. Not likely, but he wouldn't write it off just yet. The breakup would be attributed to the pressures of their careers and difficulty of maintaining a relationship in the public eye. They would only talk positively about each other and avoid negative connotations or blame. Their last appearance as a couple would be at a playoff game or one of Delia's shows, whichever they agreed on at the time. I don't do the dating thing either, just so you know. Delia took a drink of her water. Jack swiped up to read the paragraphs he'd skipped. I find that hard to believe. Hilarious. He lifted his head. Now I'm just disappointed. A few minutes ago, you made it sound like I had something to look forward to, but if you've been signed since the summer and dating isn't looking up, I think it's a little different for women versus men. You mean easier? Hell no, I don't mean easier. Normal, well-adjusted men were difficult to find when I wasn't well-known. You mean a celebrity? I don't like using that word. Why not? Because it's pretentious. She sat back in her chair and folded her arms in front of her. Her shirt sleeves came past her wrists, and she gripped the hem against her palms. It was cute. Jack closed the tablet. It was cute. Jack closed the tablet cover and slid the device to the side. Isn't it factual? Do you think you're a celebrity? I think I'm probably a 15-minuter. That's a long time, depending on the circumstance. Delia, oh, whoops. That's a long time, depending on the circumstance, Delia muttered, then froze as she reached for her water cup. I'm sorry, Jack didn't hear the rest of her stammered apology through his laughter. How did she keep doing that? Taking him completely off guard and making him forget why he was there or why he should be walking away and collecting Clara from the pub. I don't know what's gotten into me. Delia pushed her hair out of her face. Maybe we just shouldn't talk anymore. Because it's after a show and you should be introverting? Delia nodded. Exactly. Right now, I have no filter. Jack took a drink of his water. Lemony. So, normally you won't be joking around. Even as he said it, something told him there was no normal with Delia Melise. She nodded stoically. Right. All business. I won't talk much. I won't annoy you if that's what you're worried about. It's not. He held her gaze a moment and saw that flush creep up her neck. What is your tattoo? On your arm? She asked. He'd noticed her eyeing his ink back in the dressing room and glancing at his arm when she thought he wasn't watching. I thought we weren't talking. She exhaled. You don't have to tell me. Jack pulled up his sleeve and pointed at his forearm. This was my first one. Pine cones? Delia frowned. They're serotinous cones, from the lodgepole pine. They only open after a wildfire. They only open after a wildfire melts the resin so they can open. Delia's finger twitched, and for a moment he thought she was going to reach out and trace the lines on his skin. Instead, she balled her hand into a fist. What was next? Then I decided I wanted this to be a full sleeve, so I had an artist work in the Rockies, hockey. What's the owl? Delia's hand got closer, but she didn't touch him. Head on a swivel. Jack waited a beat to see if she understood. When she obviously didn't, he explained. We have to see everything on the ice. One of my coaches had this pregame thing he did about barn owls. Delia's lip twitched. And is that a praying mantis? Jack's heart skipped a beat. Yeah. He rolled down his sleeve, careful to keep the fabric off his bandage. Jack hoped when he covered up his arm she'd get the hint and let it go. She didn't. What does it symbolize? That one's personal. Delia's lips parted. Then she pulled her hand back and nodded. Sure. Thanks for showing me. She searched for something to stare at, but since their menus were gone, all they had were condiments. Did you hurt yourself? Jack frowned as Delia grabbed the ketchup bottle and started reading the ingredients list. You had a bandage on your arm. Oh, yeah. No, that was a tattoo I got this morning. He didn't think she'd noticed it since his sleeve had barely come up that far. Delia's eyes snapped up. You got one this morning? You got one this morning? What is it? Just then the waiter arrived with their tacos. The scent of slow roasted meat along with chilies and onion made his mouth water, and Jack wasted no time before digging in. He took a bite, barely avoiding juice dripping under the sleeve of his shirt with a quick lift of his elbow. Delia stared at her plate. Okay, this is where I get to do something fun. He's eating, so I'm going to do a little bit of eating while I say these lines. Is something wrong? Now I have to finish chewing. Okay. He asked, still holding his taco. Delia worried her bottom lip. I don't usually eat while I'm out. I think I impulse ordered. Let me do that one more time. I don't usually eat while I'm out. I think I impulse ordered. Jack looked between her and his partially eaten taco. But you're hungry. So you should eat. She nodded. She didn't make a move, so Jack took another bite. When he finished the taco, he used a napkin to wipe his fingers. Movement outside the window caught their attention. When Jack's eyes focused beyond the glass, he saw a girl and her boyfriend recording them from the sidewalk. Delia smiled and gave a small wave. I'll just ask for a box. Jack stood and jerked the table away from the wall, and Delia gasped. He sandwiched his chair between the window and the end of the table, moving as close to the corner as he could to block the view of any onlookers. There. He picked up a second taco and took the messiest bite he could muster. All right, here we go again. I'll eat like this, so no matter what pics they're able to get, nobody will be looking at you. You can't understand me? You can't understand me? I said. I said. Okay, I think that's done with the food ones. Okay. Delia clapped a hand over her mouth, but it couldn't hide the smile stretching from ear to ear. What? Jack shoved the food into his right cheek until it bulged. Delia snorted and grabbed her napkin. No, stop, I get it. Her eyes squinched and she grabbed onto herself like she didn't know what would happen if she let her laughter out in full force. Jack wished he could see what that looked like. The tacos are really good. He licked his lips. I can see that. You should try them. Her eyes flicked to his. I'm working up to it. Just fine. Delia picked up her taco like she was trying to remove a plastic femur without hitting the buzzer in the game Operation. Shove it in. Shove it on in. Jack spread his elbows on the table and hovered to make sure nobody could get a glimpse of her leaning over her plate. Delia took the most dainty bite known to humankind, but her eyes lit up. See? Better fresh than to go. Yeah. She nodded and took another mouse bite. Mary appeared at the end of the table, her eyes wide. What the hell is happening here? Jack felt like a kid caught with his hand in the bag of chocolate his mom hid behind the cereal. We're eating? Yeah, I can see that. She shot Delia a look. You'll eat for him? The stranger you met 10 minutes ago? Really? Delia chewed and swallowed. No, it's late, so I know I'm going right back to the hotel room and I won't have to deal with fuzzy teeth. Fuzzy teeth? Was that what this whole thing had been about? Delia pointed to the glass. Plus, he blocked the... That's all I had to do to get you to eat a proper meal? Put my ass between you and the cameras? Mary put her hands on her hips. Only if it's a nice ass, Jack quipped as he picked up his last taco. Delia stifled a smile, and Jack's stomach flipped. And that was the exact moment he knew he couldn't, in fact, sign the contract. Okay, that was chapter 7. Hello, welcome, welcome. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, I have never done a live. Let me see. I have never done a live on YouTube before, so I'm assuming that if there's a chat, it'll just pop up. Feel free to leave comments. I always stop at the chapter break. So let's do one more chapter. Chapter 8. That was kind of a fun one because I got to eat food. That's always fun when that happens. All right, let's do chapter 8. Except now my mouth is going to be all weird, so. All right. Chapter 8. You didn't sign it? Clara hissed as they got back into his truck. Jack hit the start button and turned on the seat warmers. Jack, seriously, was there something terrible in one of those clauses? You'd know if you came with me. Clara rolled her eyes. I wasn't going to be a third wheel on a date. It wasn't a date. It was a business meeting. Yeah, I know. She slumped against the seat and clicked in her seatbelt. She was so nice, though, and beautiful and talented. Clara sighed. She could have made a great fake girlfriend. Jack shot his sister a sidelong glance. I don't need a fake girlfriend. True, you need an actual one. True, you need an actual one, Clara muttered as she pulled her lip balm from her purse. She smoothed it on, then rubbed her lips together. Want any? Jack shook his head. The oil from the tacos was still soaking into the skin around his mouth. He'd flirted with her. What the hell had he been thinking? The little sound she'd made when he pulled on the table had lodged in his brain like a goat's head burr. It pricked when he moved. I'll find a girlfriend when I'm ready. He clenched the wheel as they waited at the stoplight. Clara and Oscar, along with half the players on the Snowballs, had been trying to set him up for months. He'd have been lying if he said he didn't think about companionship. There were nights where he craved it. The problem was that the one person he wanted by his side was buried under a meter of earth. Clara sighed. She was right, you know. Who was? Delia. About you being a nice person? The light turned green and he turned left. I didn't just go for you. I was curious about the whole thing too. But you wouldn't have gone if you didn't know it was important to me. He shrugged. Maybe I would have. Clara smirked. Don't pretend to be too cool for school. You can't pull it off. The corner of Jack's mouth lifted as he adjusted his grip on the wheel. Clara looked pleased. Are you working from home tomorrow? Jack nodded, already skipping ahead to the insane schedule he had to keep. Work, meetings, practice, lifting, somehow get in his nutrition, sleep, rinse, repeat. I'll be home for the morning at least. I should be getting some samples in the mail. If they arrive on time, it would be good to meet with Xander in person. Xander? That's the designer? Yeah. He's Yeah. He's ready to make some mock-ups. Big Rick, the company he worked for, was redesigning one of their least popular men's coats for the next ski season, and Jack's deadline to get the portfolio options was looming. Isn't that a pretty fast turnaround? Jack turned onto the exit for Deerfoot and sped up to merge. Yeah, the samples are usually the bottleneck. Then you have practice with the blizzard. Clara cupped her hands around her mouth and mimicked a crowd cheering his name. Jack laughed. Right. Clara dropped back against her seat. I still can't believe this is your life. My little brother. She shook her head and grinned at him. You like the guys? I feel old. You are old, and don't even say it. Clara stuck out her tongue. Jack bit back his comment about her being 18 months older. Everyone assumed he was the oldest sibling anyway because of their size difference, and because there was a bit of salt and pepper starting to appear when he grew his beard out. Clara yawned as they pulled onto her street. That was amazing. Truly. Even if you don't want Delia as your fake girlfriend, which I still think you should reconsider, I'm glad we went tonight. Thank you so much, Jackie. She reached over and tried to ruffle his hair, but he blocked her arm and nearly swerved onto the sidewalk. Jack stepped into the Saddle Dome, and as the chill of the arena pressed against his skin, the weight on his shoulders immediately lessened. All morning he'd been getting texts and screenshots with pictures of him and Delia at Mally's the night before. Most of them had, in fact, been of his ass. Apparently, the whole country thought it was adorable that he'd stepped in to protect Delia from view. Apparently, the whole country thought it was adorable that he'd stepped in to protect Delia from view as she ate. There were also pics of Mary standing in front of the two of them with a stern look on her face. The headline, "Someone's been pucking naughty," was his personal favorite. In the past 6 hours, he'd received an education. Clara had informed him that the video taken of them was going viral on TikTok, where an online community of avid book fans were next to rabid at the news that he'd been spotted out with Delia. Hashtag real-life rom-com was trending on 3 different platforms. The whole thing was insanity. There had been a group of people staking out spots by the Saddle Dome when he'd arrived, but security there was good. He'd given a wave toward the fence as he walked into practice, wishing he'd worn something better than his typical joggers and a hoodie. Something had definitely shifted since the night before, and he was working to grasp the scope of it. Would it all blow over in a day or two? A week? It would have to die down at some point since he had no intention of stoking the fire with more photo ops. His time with Delia Melise was a one and done. Jack walked down the hall, then pushed through the doors into the dressing room. Instead of being met with Andre powdering his balls on the bench, there was low chatter humming beneath pump-up music. The dressing room itself was pristine. Better than that facility in Springbank, which was saying something. There were spacious, personalized lockers for each player, constructed from polished wood instead of cheap metal. His nameplate wasn't up yet, but their manager had assured him multiple times it was coming. The floors were covered with durable, non-slip rubber matting instead of bare concrete, and to one side there was a large, logo-emblazoned carpet with the Blizzard's emblem. Besides the state-of-the-art speakers, there was a high-tech video system set up for game analysis and strategy sessions. Besides the state-of-the-art speakers, there was a high-tech video system set up for game analysis and strategy sessions, a medical and training room with the latest in rehabilitation equipment, and a nutrition center. Since he worked a full-time job, he had yet to take advantage of any of it. Jack wound his way through the equipment and half-dressed players to his spot. Hey, Jack. Good to see you. Nathan Pelletier put out a fist, and Jack bumped it before setting his gear down on the bench. Good weekend? Nathan nodded. Chill. Spent it with the wife and kids. At 27, he was 2 years younger than Jack and already had a 3-year-old and a 6-month-old baby. You? Before Jack could answer, he snorted. I'm sorry, I can't do it, bud. I was going to try and play it cool, but you have to tell me how you met Delia. The second the word Delia left his lips, hoots and hollers sounded out through the room along with, robbing the cradle, eh, bud? And, did you smash? Jack's ribs ratcheted around his lungs. My sister's a huge fan. She was nice enough to say hi to us after her show. I didn't see your sister in the picture. Monahan, the Blizzard's center, noted, and Jack wanted to pinch himself to make sure this was real. His NHL heroes were standing there in the dressing room digging for information on his night. Was she the Karen chewing you out, bud? Lindholm asked. Tkachuk grinned as he pulled on his pads. Are you a fan of her music? No, that was Delia's friend, and yes, I think her music's great. Jack turned to unzip his bag, ignoring the groans of his teammates. He knew what he'd have to do to keep their attention, but the idea of saying anything else about Delia when he'd talked with her for a total of 40 minutes seemed asinine. Maybe they had the luxury of getting distracted by a pretty face, but Jack didn't. Coaches and management were watching him like a hawk at practices and games, and he had to look his best out there. He dressed on autopilot as banter swirled around him, catching bits and pieces about the threesome Nils Johansson had had. Catching bits and pieces about the threesome Nils Johansson had on Saturday with his best friends he met at the Stampede last summer. They were either from Amsterdam or loved to visit Amsterdam, or wanted to pretend Calgary was Amsterdam for the night. Either way, Nils was a big fan. How did you meet up with her, though? Monahan's voice cut through the machismo as Jack pulled on his jersey. He grunted. I happened to stand next to her publicist. Someone asked me for my autograph and he recognized me. Even without signing the contract, he was lying for that girl. And you went out for dinner? Jack replayed Delia laughing as he made a mess of his taco. Yeah, everyone was starving after the show. Nathan chuckled. Keeping it low-key, I get it. There's nothing to. I get it, bud. He patted Jack's shoulder, then sat to lace his skates. There was no good explanation for why he wouldn't be trying to pursue a famous singer, so he didn't bother pushing it. Instead, he finished getting dressed while trying to keep his mind from launching into comparisons between him and the other wingers on the team. Lindholm, with his electrifying pace, had been a first-round pick, 12th overall in the 2021 draft. Last season, he boasted an impressive tally of 24 goals and 30 assists, but his defensive game still needed work. Then there was Owen Monahan, drafted in the second round, 35th overall in 2019. He'd become known for his physicality, amassing 200 hits in the last season alone. His offensive numbers were modest, with 15 goals and 20 assists, but his plus-minus stood at plus 12. Liam McDonald, the latest addition, was chosen 18th overall in the most recent draft. His rookie year had been a roller coaster, but he managed to notch 10 goals and 15 assists, a respectable start with a plus-minus of -2. If the last 6 weeks were any sign, though, Liam's career was on the backslide. He'd been showing up late to practice, getting less ice time. Jack had never shirked his responsibilities, but he couldn't help but see something of himself in the kid. After a brief team meeting with Coach Novak and assistant coach Kreviazik, the Blizzard charged down the tunnel to the ice. Practice kicked off with speed drills, then endurance conditioning. Jack leaned into the burn, glad to have a reason not to be in his head. They moved into passing drills, and Jack dug in to keep up. Lindholm and McDonald were fast, strong. He was used to playing with the snowballs, and while Tyler, Sean, and Country had intensity, they were 10 years older than the guys here. Jack had to push. and it felt good. It also scared the hell out of him. One dream game wasn't enough to clinch his spot on the team, especially since the player he was replacing wasn't out permanently. He had to start putting up stats, ASAP. The whistle sliced across the arena as they circled up for a scrimmage. Harrison! Harrison! Coach Krivyazik called from the boards. Management needs a minute. Jack pressed his blades into the ice, pulling to a stop. Should I? Go ahead and get changed. Shit. Jack's stomach churned like it was filled with rocks. That was it then. They'd decided to bench him or pull out of his contract. There were enough contingencies built in, it wouldn't be difficult. Jack tromped to the dressing room and peeled off his gear. He showered as fast as he could to minimize the dread and avoid running into his teammates as they finished practice. He cleared out his locker, which didn't hold much anyway, and trekked to the upper levels of the Saddle Dome. The rubber on the soles of his shoes squeaked against the polished floors. Jack was ushered into a meeting room that smelled of new paint and a vanilla-scented candle. There was a mini fridge and a bar along the far wall, and an oval table in the center surrounded by high-backed chairs. There was a mini fridge and bar along the far wall, and an oval table in the center surrounded by high-backed chairs. The team's manager, the team's general manager, Alex Renard, and the head of marketing, Lisa Carter, who he'd met upon his initial signing, were already seated, their expressions unreadable. Jack, take a seat, Alex began, his tone cordial. Jack was already on edge, and the clinical greeting didn't help. Wasn't expecting to be back here so soon. Jack pulled out a chair and sat. Sorry we had to interrupt practice, but I've got a flight to catch tonight. Alex tapped his phone screen as if to emphasize how little time he had to deal with the situation. He glanced up. Why are you carrying your game gear? Jack frowned. I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to... He started, but Lisa cut him off with a wave of her hand. Jack, we appreciate that, but we wanted to have a quick discussion about the buzz you've been generating. Our ticket sales for Saturday's game went through the roof this morning. Seems like your little escapade with Delia Melise has caught everyone's attention. Jack blinked. This was about his dinner with Delia? He could think of 100 other reasons for ticket sales to fluctuate. Good weather, or the fact that they were playing the Oilers being his top picks. You're sure it's not because it's Edmonton? Lisa clicked around on her laptop, then turned the screen to face him. These were our ticket sales for our last rivalry game, about 10% higher than normal season sales, and this, she clicked again, is our gross ticket sales as of 30 seconds ago compared with where we sat last night at 7. Holy hell. Jack ran a hand through his damp hair. The sky-high bar on the chart dwarfed the one next to it. How was that possible? The fans are rallying, the media is buzzing, and obviously that's been a boon for the franchise. But we're wondering... Alex paused, eyeing Jack with a mix of curiosity and calculation. Is this going to be an ongoing thing, just so we can plan accordingly? Jack's mind raced. He'd walked into this room expecting to face a dissolution of his contract, and instead found out that his hour of sitting across from Delia, eating birria tacos, had nearly doubled the ticket sales for the Blizzard that weekend. Exactly like Tony told him it would. Jack cleared his throat. I'm not sure. The whole thing is pretty fresh. Lisa's laugh was light, but her eyes locked onto his like a bird of prey. Well, we're fans of whatever this turns into, and while we're not in the business of managing your personal life, we did want to make it clear that this kind of press is exactly what we want to encourage. It's good for the team, and what's good for the team is good for all of us, right? Jack nodded. Right. He spun the pen sitting in front of him on the table a half turn. Delia lives in Toronto, though, and... In situations like this, we're happy to make accommodations. Just keep us in the loop, and we can make adjustments as needed. Oh, wait, that's Alex. Never mind. In situations like this, we're happy to make accommodations. Just keep us in the loop, and we can make adjustments as needed. I'll talk with your coaches. Alex pushed out his chair and slipped his phone in his pocket. Accommodations? What kind of accommodations? Lisa slipped a card across the polished wood. It would be best if you contacted me directly, and if this becomes more than something fresh, if Delia has a publicist, I'd love to be introduced. She stood and motioned for him to exit as Alex gathered his personal items into a leather messenger bag. Jack stalked back into the hall, feeling like his head had just been plunged in a bucket of ice water. He wasn't being fired. Not even close. He was getting accommodations, encouragement, special treatment. How the hell had a few pictures made this kind of impact? It didn't seem possible. Though, nothing in his life over the past month had seemed possible. If someone would have told him that by March he'd be playing in the NHL, getting phone calls from famous stars and selling out the Saddledome, he would have laughed in their face. The whole thing sounded like something he would have written on his vision board in grade 3. Jack walked to his truck in a daze, barely noticing the crowd that had gathered by the entrance to the lot. Do you have more plans to see Delia? The implications were obvious. He'd put butts in seats after his first appearance with the Blizzard, but those numbers were next level. He threw his gear in the back, realizing he should have returned it all to his locker, then slumped into the front seat. He drew a deep breath and rested his forehead on the steering wheel. After a few moments, he pulled out his phone. What's good for the team is good for all of us, right? If he'd felt like a money grubber looking over the contract last night, it was nothing compared to dialing Tony's number now. Let me guess, management is thrilled with you right now. Tony sounded smug, and Jack didn't have 1 gram of leverage. Yeah, you could say that. Jack started the truck but didn't pull out of his spot. Tony chuckled. I've got to be honest, I expected this call a lot sooner than 10 o'clock, though I guess it's only 8 in Calgary, eh? Sorry, forgot about the time change. No, I'm always up late. He grunted like he was pushing up from an easy chair. Any changes you want to the contract before I have Kels send it over for you to sign? I don't think so. Jack felt like a dog skulking back to his owner with his tail between his legs. I guess I don't fully understand how this will work. Delia's recording a new album there. I'm playing here. My management team says they can make some accommodations. Tony laughed out loud. Damn right they can. Listen, it will take creativity, but we'll make it work. Do you have an agent or... Head of marketing. Her name's Lisa. Perfect. Send me over her info and we'll take care of it. At this point, you just need to sit back and enjoy the ride. And get to the damn airport on time. Kels hates rescheduling flights. All right, that was chapter 8. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I'm going to pause for lunch, and I am sure I will be back at some point. This is chapter 8, and there's like 32 chapters. So, all right, we will see you later. This book is on the Power Play. It will be posted to my YouTube channel in just a few days. Okay, see ya.